Thank you for joining us today as we discuss how we can accelerate public health solutions for climate change. Adaptations of entertainment education methods have improved public health outcomes for over 30 years. Variations of them, including comedy and transmedia storytelling, provide mechanisms for culturally adapting to our changing environment at scale, implementing solutions at a faster rate as we culturally adapt to climate change. This multidisciplinary work has implications for sustainability, public health policy, multiple stressor interactions, and disparities in environmental exposure and health. We appreciate this opportunity to share this work with you, and we hope that you will join us in continuing to develop it. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Debra Safer and Celia Gurney. I sincerely appreciate the work that they contributed to making this work possible and them taking the time to share it with this community. Dr. Debra Safer is a faculty member within the Stanford School of Medicine's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. While her clinical work originally focused on behavior change at the patient care level, more recently, she has broadened this focus by leveraging her understanding of human behavior to address climate change. This includes research, writing, and community involvement regarding the physical and mental health impacts of climate change, with a particular emphasis on the use of pro-social and entertainment education programs in shifting attitudes and behaviors at a nationwide scale. These programs, which she'll be discussing in her talk, are based on the theoretical models of self-efficacy and social modeling developed by Albert Bandura. Celia Gurney is an upright Citizens Brigade-trained comedy writer and performer who spent the last 3 years producing videos and social media content at Climate Nexus, a climate change communications firm based in New York. In 2019, she wrote, produced, and directed an award-winning web series about individual climate action as a part of an exploratory entertainment education initiative. In her talk, she will discuss the power of, as well as strategies to, effectively harness both comedy and digital marketing in service of climate change entertainment education, using the web series as a case study. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies from the University of Washington, Seattle. There are a range of tools that modify existing entertainment education work to implement it at scale for the interwoven topics and audiences that are involved in climate mitigation and adaptation, including geospatial mapping of climate solutions, people assigned as transmedia leads interconnecting solutions with media types, digital markers for integrating the individual stories digitally in social networks, and physical nudges incorporated into the built environment, providing real-life connections for people navigating these issues in their communities. This work is ongoing. Please contact us if you'd like to join this conversation. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for your participation.
Hello, it's an honor to be here and to be giving this presentation on education entertainment's ability to move the needle on climate change. So today I'll be talking about climate change as a public health emergency. I'll talk about how we have an opportunity here to address multiple stressor interactions and disparities in environmental exposure and health. I'll be introducing entertainment education, its theoretical principles and evidence of its global track record, and then I'll be discussing next steps. So I'll begin with something that those in this audience are probably all too aware of, that public health emergencies include climate change, and that climate change has a massive deleterious effect on our communities through the effects of extreme weather and other effects. These include physiological effects like heat-related illnesses, such as heat stroke, communicable diseases like West Nile virus, and respiratory symptoms like asthma. How our health is harmed by climate change depends to some degree on the geographic region that we're in. So for example, in California, we might be more affected by wildfires than in the northeastern part of the United States, where we might see more of an effect of mosquito and tick-borne diseases. The mental health effects can be easier to overlook than the physical effects. but extreme temperature is associated with greater risk for violence and diagnoses such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance abuse, suicidal thoughts, and also loss of identity, helplessness, strains on relationship, etc. Importantly, the increased risk for violence includes the increased risk for domestic violence. These mental health effects are compounded by economic stresses like job loss, displacement, and homelessness, and social stresses caused by isolation and reduced opportunities to obtain stress relief, such as through socialization and exercise. And there's a disproportionate impact of mental health effects on those of us in our community who are most vulnerable and marginalized. The current COVID-19 pandemic is an opportunity for those of us, ourselves and those we love, to unfortunately experience firsthand the mental health consequences of a pandemic through social distancing, quarantine, isolation from protective sources, misinformation. And here I have a reference to John Cook's work and research in this area, and the effects of misinformation on reducing trust in one another and in our public institutions, and the violent ways sometimes in which that reduced trust can be manifested in stigmatization and shunning. COVID-19 also represents an opportunity to not only identify vulnerabilities within our larger society and organizational structures, but also to help us more fully appreciate how accurate and timely public education campaigns can be used to increase collaboration, social resilience, and protective health behaviors. Through these mechanisms, more effective responses can take place for both the current and future threats related to our public health. So now I'd like to introduce EE, or entertainment education. So EE is a type of media program, a television or radio series that blends entertainment, usually about 80%, and education, about 20%, that both are integrated into a larger campaign, including multimedia platforms like websites that I'll be discussing later. EE is based on proven psychological, behavioral, and entertainment principles that were developed nearby to us, at least those in the Bay Area, at Stanford by Dr. Albert Bandura. Bandura's social cognitive theory of behavior change included two primary mechanisms: social modeling, saying that we change by emulating those we admire, and also self-efficacy, that we change when we feel or believe we have the capacity to change and to overcome obstacles, and that without belief in that capacity, we have little incentive to act or persevere. Research support shows that EE has developed a powerful global track record for shifting attitudes and behaviors, yet EE has never been used to address climate change directly. This here is meant to show the over 50 countries that have benefited from EE shows addressing complex issues such as vaccination, literacy, reproductive health, hygiene, HIV transmission, conservation, and many other complex issues. Examples of organizations that have participated in producing and distributing EE shows include Population Media Center, Johns Hopkins Center for Communication Programs, and there's also an international summit, the SBCC, that meets to bring these organizations together to discuss EE and those who share an interest in EE. The purpose of this slide is to give one example of how effective EE can be. So here we have a slide, we have a graph showing the enrollment in a literacy program, a self-study literacy program in Mexico. Prior to the entertainment education show's broadcast, about 90,000 people had enrolled in the programs, and that was not considered very successful. So EE was brought in. Within 1 year of broadcast, the enrollment in these self-study programs had gone up tenfold to 1 million, and then reduced again after the broadcast year. And the mechanism by which this impact was felt included the ability to address the psychosocial barriers that we've talked about. For example, in this show, a popular media star played the role of a literate person, the teacher, and she was able to persuade diverse characters who represented different segments of the population to join a self-study reading group. The characters voiced their self-doubts and erroneous beliefs, and the teacher corrected their misbeliefs and persuaded them that they did have the ability to succeed. So through doing social modeling and self-efficacy, as mentioned, the enrollment increased strikingly during the year of broadcast. So there are effective communication methods that are part of EE. These include extensive formative research to understand the target audience and the barriers that they believe they face, plot lines that are then developed to portray these characters' everyday lives and the impediments that they face. And this helps the viewers envision a better life for themselves by being provided strategies and incentives through the model of the characters to take steps for the viewing audience to realize their own hopes and dreams. And over hundreds of episodes spanning several years, the viewers form emotional bonds to the characters who evolve at a believable pace. And multimedia platform extensions are used to broaden the reach of the show. This slide is meant to illustrate some of the ways in which the characters develop over the course of the show. So they're the positive characters who really embody the values and portray the kinds of actions that the show targets and wants the audience to change to. The negative characters embody the negative values, and they don't change over the course of the show, even though they may experience negative consequences of their actions. And then there are the transitional characters, who are those who are most similar to the target audience. And they vacillate between the two extremes, but ultimately move towards the positive characters and become and they're rewarded. This is meant to show that for climate change, and Emily Coren can say more about this, we probably will focus more on positive and transitional characters rather than including the negative characters. So because we need to get people on board quickly and to create change as quickly as possible. This is an example of entertainment education in the US through the show East Los High. Produced by Wise Entertainment in collaboration with Population Media Center, this show was highly critically acclaimed and very popular with 5 daytime Emmy nominations. This show not only focused on reducing pregnancy among Latino youth, which was the main goal of the show, but it also included plot lines that address multiple other issues such as voting, immigration, birth control, pregnancy, violence, domestic violence, and sexual abuse. In this clip, I'm going to illustrate some of the transmedia platforms that were used to draw viewers in after watching the show. They were drawn to websites and blogs and NGOs to learn more about the issues raised in the show.
Sassy, come on. Will you marry me?
Yes. You know someone like Sassy, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
But who was to talk about their father molesting them? You're not to blame.
Are we together or what?
I'm just becoming comfortable with who I am.
The only thing positive about you is your HIV status and proud. I'm Vanessa, giving you the 411 on HIV for free.
Welcome to another edition of Ask Paul. If you got any questions about sex or dating, you can click the link below. You can get an STI through oral sex or vaginal sex.
You shouldn't even be in this competition, let alone this country.
I've lived in this country my whole life. I'm just as American as you are.
Made for you, and you'll never be like me.
So I now wanted to discuss Rhythm in Blue, and Glue, which is a prototype comedy series that was developed by Emily Coren, the leader of this session, for climate engagement. It was written as a prototype for a National Science Foundation grant, and it was used to demonstrate how to connect climate and health, and also to show how multiple individual level actions and community level actions could be woven into a single narrative. So what we show, what this slide is showing through these different lines are the different plot lines that intersect. And so there is this green here is a more public health plot line focused on asthma. There is a plot line on individual actions like transportation that people can take against climate change, civic actions or collective actions that people can take. And we can talk more about this during the question and answer. This slide is meant to show another example of a project taking place right now called the Good Energy Project, or Climate Storytelling in Hollywood, which involves a number of different organizations: Sierra Club, NRDC, the USC Annenberg Norman Lear Center, and it's something else that we can maybe discuss in the final discussion, as well as these issues. Like, we've given you a sense of how EE methods could be adapted to address climate change. Can we talk more about that potentially in the question and answer? And also, what role can non-media industry institutions play in supporting this effort? Anyway, thank you very much, and I appreciate your attention.
Hi everyone, my name is Celia Gurney, and today I'm going to be talking about comedy as an entertainment education tactic set, and I'll be talking about it through the lens of a case study, and that is 9 for 2019, which was a project that I led at Climate Nexus last year. So let's get right to it. What exactly was 9 for 2019? It was a web series consisting of 9 short videos, each about 1 minute and 15 seconds long, and each video was about an individual climate action that people could undertake. Each video was a mix of information and comedy. We referred to them as PSA style videos, and they were also mockumentary style, so somewhat inspired by The Office. We loved part direct to camera work and part the actors doing the actions and kind of commenting on them later in the direct to camera segments. We targeted audiences based on their interests and geographic location. So through Google Ads and Facebook, we were able to target people whose interests included science, adventure travel, things like board games, online shopping, as well as comedy, and people who had education levels that were some college or some grad school, as well as people living within 25 miles of cities in various, mostly coastal states: California, New York, Washington State, DC, Florida, cities in those states. I'm not sure if I said that. Here's a screenshot from the website. And here are screenshots of the different videos. So each video was accompanied by a pledge button, and we had people, our goal was to get people to hit that button, put in their information, including their email, and then we would send them automated emails inviting them to take additional pledges, and in particular following up about the final action, which was being a climate voter. Because this video series was produced by Climate Nexus, and it also was in partnership with the Environmental Voter Project. And the Environmental Voter Project's whole mission is centered around the idea that a lot of people who identify as environmentalists in the US never make it to the polls on voting day. And so they're really working to address that problem by identifying these environmental voters and getting them to commit to sign up, committing to be environmental voters, taking on that identity, and then EVP will send them reminders about upcoming elections. So our final action was be a climate voter. It's an individual action, but of course it leverages into or adds up to collective action. And based on the framework that Emily introduced in her intro that was put together by a number of colleagues, we now understand that phrases like be a climate voter or other phrases that we used like eat lower carbon protein could evolve into digital markers. And just to review that framework, it is here. So we have markers, mapping, physical nudges, and glue. And I'll be talking a bit more about each of those throughout this presentation. So we talked a lot about whether it was worth doing a project centered around individual action. some reasons that individual action is good to talk about. When we started 9 for 2019, it was just after the 4th National Climate Assessment and the IPCC 1.5 report had come out. And so a lot of people who didn't normally follow climate change news that closely were hearing the big doom and gloom stuff like, we only have 12 years to solve this problem. And they were really concerned. And so people working at Climate Nexus had a lot of friends and family come up to us asking, what can we do? What can we do? So individual action can be an antidote to some of that climate despair. It also feels good for people to act in accordance with their values. And if you think about it kind of from a sales perspective, if you kind of get people started on one little individual action that they can do, perhaps you can ladder them up to larger and larger actions. But unfortunately, the fossil fuel industry loves when we talk about individual action, and they even created the idea of carbon footprints because they wanted to distract people from the fact that ultimately, you know, the fossil fuel industry needs to be held accountable, and we really need these large scale governmental sweeping actions. It's also not always appropriate to ask people to engage in individual climate action, depending on what resources they have, how much time they have, whether they live in developed or developing countries. And additionally, you do risk activating single action bias, whereby people feel like, oh, well, you know, I've done my recycling for the day, so now I can drive to my friend's house instead of biking or whatever. Or now I don't have to write to my representatives, maybe would be a better example. And so collective action, definitely greater impact. It places responsibility on those who are responsible, and it is ultimately necessary for us to solve climate change. But maybe it's a both and. Maybe it doesn't need to be, should we only focus on one or the other, because individual actions do add up to drive culture and policy change. And then in turn, the culture and policy change drives more individual action. So you could almost say that it's a positive feedback loop, which normally is not a good thing to hear in the climate change space, but here we are. What else was I going to say about that? Oh yeah, well, I think you can see the power of individual and collective action working together really when we think about COVID. I mean, in the very beginning, before these mandates were coming down from the top that people needed to be wearing masks out in public, people were really looking to their social circles to see how seriously others were taking the mask wearing. And it did make a difference in the spread of the disease when it first was really widely circulating in New York, for example. And both individual action and collective action offer an opportunity for physical nudges to be incorporated into entertainment education type stuff. An example, an example would be not strictly related to entertainment education, but in terms of individual action, a restaurant, a local organic restaurant, for example, could paint arrows on the ground that helping to guide people to its doors. And then on a more systemic level, governments could provide the resources and information that people need to get to their voting locations, whether that be shuttles or, you know, things like that on a more systemic level. So why comedy? Why should we use comedy as a tool? At Climate Nexus, we were really inspired and moved by a report that came out from the Hewlett Foundation that found that the climate change communication space is heavy on facts and figures, but light on emotion, found or explained. And the digital space provides an opportunity to engage imaginations and emotions via, for example, comedy. Additionally, unfortunately, deniers are currently winning on YouTube. And here we have a screenshot of a video by some climate deniers. And the title of this video on YouTube is InfoWars host, hurricane threatening Hawaii has been split in two by energy beam shot from Antarctica, possibly by John Kerry. So as you can see, they have some really attention getting stuff, and we've got to get out there and grab attention and win YouTube and other spaces back. So Why Comedy Part 2, a great, amazing book came out this year. I highly recommend it. It's called A Comedian and an Activist Walk into a Bar, The Serious Role of Comedy in Social Justice. And it's by Katie Borum-Chatu of the Center for Media and Social Impact at American University and Dr. Lauren Feldman of Rutgers. And they list tons of great reasons that we should use comedy to communicate about climate change as well as poverty in this book. Among them, it provides new ways of thinking about the issue by connecting climate change to everyday topics. It's also a Trojan horse, so it packages critiques in entertainment, and then it kind of creates a positive association with normally a very doomy, gloomy topic in people's minds, and negative generally. It may help reduce counter-arguing as well. So when our brains are tied up processing a joke, some research shows that it makes it harder for us to think of counter-arguments. And it can also say what other media can't or won't. Comedy's not encumbered by traditional journalistic norms, is how they explain it in the book. Also, Chatu and Feldman talk about a study that they did in 2018, in which they showed participants each one of 4 different videos, and those videos were a couple of climate change sketch comedy videos from Funny or Die. One was called Old People Don't Care About Climate Change, and the second one was called Climate Change Denial Disorder. There was also a serious video of CNN meteorologist Jennifer Gray talking about climate change information and showing some video clips. And there was also a control video that was a Funny or Die sketch that wasn't about climate change. So Chatu and Feldman asked participants questions after they watched the videos to gauge their attitudes, behaviors, and reactions. And ultimately they found that comedy provides a pathway to increased engagement on climate change via hope and enjoyment. The people who watched the climate change comedy videos, because of the enjoyment that they experienced, they were more likely to say that they would seek out and share information on climate change. News uses the fear pathway to increase engagement on climate change. The study also highlighted the potential benefits of politically neutral comedy. So the Climate Change Denial Disorder video called out Republicans and climate change deniers, and compared to the Old People Don't Care About Climate Change video, which was politically neutral, the Climate Change Denial Disorder video was less likely to be received in those positive ways by more conservative participants that watched that video. So a lot of satire, like a lot of the comedy that we see about climate change now is on late night shows, which do tend to skewer those groups pretty hard, pretty often. And so it may be useful to think about other places we can sort of get comedy out of this issue. And Chatu and Feldman lay out a bunch of great ideas in their book, listed here, many of them listed here. And then I also came up with a list of some things that I think are really funny about climate change. Conferences, I think, are really funny. So there's a whole funny conference culture thing. Perceived competition for public attention. I know that I personally, in working on climate change in the last 3 years, ocean plastics started to get a lot of attention, like in the media, and I actually did feel a little bit jealous of the ocean plastics people, and so that made me laugh, even though I was still experiencing jealousy. And there's some other ideas here. Okay, so getting back to 9 for 2019, a screenshot from one of the videos. How did we promote 9 for 2019? We ran a multi-channel digital campaign, so analogous to the East Los High transmedia, but a much smaller scale. We were just a team of 3 people. We also centralized campaign assets and measured performance via HubSpot. So in this context, we were acting as transmedia story coordinators. Again, from the diagram of ways to update EE for climate, we were functioning as the glue, or like one type of glue from that diagram. The free tactics that we used, a really important one was search engine optimization. We did a bunch of keyword research to see what keywords we should include in our materials that people were searching for to try to find the type of information that we were offering. We made sure there was sufficient body text, alt tags for images. We figured out what keywords should be in the URL and tried to match them to the titles. And we also used a lot of auto-generated and newsletter emails, promoted our content that way. We used social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we also reached out to influencers as well as other climate comedy groups producing climate comedy and groups that were producing, like running individual action campaigns, and we offered to cross-promote each other's content. The paid tactics that we used, we did paid paid Facebook and Instagram ads using Instant Experience, which is a special ad format. We also paid to have our ads and our links pop up on Google and alongside YouTube videos or at the beginning of YouTube videos. What we learned from this stuff, we tracked everything through HubSpot, and what we found out was that the Facebook and Instagram ads had the best cost per click price, and additionally the best click-through rate, so the highest percentage of people that clicked from the ad to all the way through to the actual site. But YouTube videos had the most engagement, so that was good to know for the future. Engagement here means comments, shares, likes, and dislikes on the video. Best performing paid ads. Oh, my personal favorite is this one, the cow in the wig, and the whole idea was like, she's moodiful. It's punny, it's supposed to be punny. I don't know if it will play to this audience. She's moodiful, but she farts a lot. Okay, so results. So we got over 4,000 visits to our website, and we got 51 pledges. And while 51 pledges may not seem to be that much for all the effort that we put in, there was a campaign we had run on a different topic at Climate Nexus before this campaign, and it generated 60 petition signups, but it actually cost 4 times as much. So it seems somewhat safe to conclude that because of the way that we ran the multi-channel campaign, as well as the use of comedy, those methods were effective at driving people to sign the pledges. Okay, more stuff on what we learned. You can see on the left the number of pledges we got for each action. The most effective methods for driving pledges were paid search and organic social. Other things that we learned, oh, this is super important. We learned it's really important to think about digital marketing from day one. We started planning this campaign, and then a new team lead joined and brought a ton of digital marketing expertise to our team. And so when she joined partway through campaign development, that's when we started working on all the SEO stuff and all the tracking kinds of things. And it just became really clear to me that if we had been able to embed that stuff from the beginning, our lives would have been a lot easier, because we could have known what keywords people were going to be searching for to find the type of content we were offering, and we could have embedded those keywords more into the scripts. We could have made sure that the titles of the videos were short enough that the URLs could exactly match the titles, all sorts of planning stuff. So I highly recommend thinking about digital marketing from the very beginning if you can. Bring an expert on. Shorter videos, always better. Repurpose your content, promote it on every channel that you have. Focus on 1 to 2 videos. That was a big learning point for us. And simpler landing pages. We did collect a lot of information to go along with each video, but ultimately people didn't really stay on the pages and read that much of the information that we offered. Okay, so back to these ways to update EE methods for climate. So we talked about markers, how things we used in 9 for 2019 could have evolved into markers in a future project. Physical nudges, we talked about those in relation to individual and collective climate action. We talked about glue through our use of HubSpot and the multi-channel campaign. Oh yeah, so mapping. A future question, and I'll go over this again at the end, is just how could we incorporate mapping into a future similar campaign? Okay, so 9 for 2019 won a prize, the final episode Be a Climate Voter, tied for 3rd place in the Inside the Greenhouse Comedy and Climate Change Video Competition. Inside the Greenhouse is a program run out of CU Boulder. And then to touch on climate justice comedy, Ain't Your Mama's Heat Wave is the first feature-length film being produced by Hip Hop Caucus's Think 100% Films. It's coming out in 2021, and it follows stand-up comedians as they journey to the Hampton Roads region of Virginia, where a lot of communities are grappling with both climate change impacts and historic injustices and inequalities. And then on the right, there is a show called An Inconvenient Talk Show. The host, an Al Gore impersonator, brings on climate change experts and also comedians. And for this special live stream, they had climate justice experts and comedians come on, and it was a benefit for We Act for Environmental Justice. things to think about and future questions. So how else can we facilitate the incorporation of climate change and climate justice into comedic film and television? I'd also like to discuss how can we empower those on the science and policy side to use comedy in their work, because I think there can be a lot of nervousness around that. And if we did 9 for 2019 again, how could we incorporate mapping? As I said earlier, down here we have a couple of programs that are already working with writers in Hollywood: Rewrite the Future from NRDC and Hollywood Health and Society. It's a program within the Norman Lear Center. So I just want to give a big thank you to the Climate Nexus digital team, particularly Elizabeth Soto, who's the associate director of that team. She created an earlier version of this presentation that I was able to build off of, and she also helped me a lot with this presentation, so big thank you to her. And please keep in touch. Feel free to find me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Celia_later. Celia has 2 E's in it for the handle. I love to repost anything that has to do with climate change and entertainment, so feel free to send stuff to me to share or just keep in touch that way. And thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.